Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba. I'm Mark, a former dive instructor, and I'm here to answer questions from Google. If you write a question into Google, it has a people also asked section, and I'm basically going to answer some of those questions, starting off with the simple question, how scuba, and then seeing where that takes me. Starting with, getting into scuba diving is really easy. The first thing that you really should do is to find your local dive centre, and then they do the rest basically. A tri-dive session is usually your first port of call, just to make sure that you enjoy it. These either take place in a swimming pool or a really shallow, safe location with an instructor. You're going to swim around for a little bit, maybe try some skills, and that's about it. Just a quick taster session to make sure you enjoy it. To get qualified to go scuba diving by yourself, you need to take part in a course that will teach you all of the fundamental skills and theory, and of course get you into the water practicing skills. From there, you can then take additional courses to dive deeper and to do other more advanced principles, but yeah. Check out the different training agencies that are out there, find a good dive centre and a good instructor, someone that you already dive with, have a chat with them. That's really the first thing that you should do. The most basic form of scuba today is called open circuit, where you blow the bubbles. You have a metal tank strapped onto your back, and that's full of compressed breathing gas. Now that can last for a good hour or so, depending on tank size, depth, and how quickly you breathe. We then attach a regulator onto that tank that regulates the air pressure down from 200 or 300 bar down to around 9 or 10, and then that goes into our hoses that we breathe from. At the end of the hoses is a second stage, the mouthpiece, that when you inhale, it opens up the valve to the hose, and then you can get access to all of that gas that you need to, and when you stop inhaling, that valve closes. When you exhale, there's another separate valve at the bottom of the mouthpiece, the second stage, that blows the bubbles out of the bottom as you exhale. It's a really nice sensation. It's not like trying to suck air through a straw. Because there's pressure behind it, it feels more natural. We've spent a lot of time trying to make regulators feel as natural as possible. There's also a bunch of additional gear to stay warm, to control our buoyancy, and computers to stay safe, but those are the real basics of breathing underwater. Just breathe normally, never hold your breath and ascend whilst you're diving. If you look up Boyle's law, the volume of an airspace decreases as the ambient pressure increases. Basically, the deeper you go, the water pressure around you crushes air spaces like your lungs down to a smaller size. The opposite as you ascend. So if you hold a full lungful of air at depth and then go up, that air is going to be expanding, and it can only expand so far before it actually hurts your lungs. So always breathe normally. The good thing about that is that, yeah, all you have to do is just breathe as you are right now, and it should never be a problem. If it's not even something that you basically need to think about, in order to not get hurt, just breathe like you are right now. If you need to swim up, just quickly hum. It makes you continuously exhale slowly, enough to stop an overexpansion injury. So if you need to ascend and you're ever worried about it, air most of the time. The only fancy thing that we do to it is to take out as much of the moisture as possible. When we filter it, we get all the dust and all that kind of stuff out as well, but we're mainly trying to get the moisture out. But most of the time, it's just good old-fashioned air, like 20.9% oxygen and around 78% nitrogen, and a few other trace gases that you breathe every single day. Some divers will use something called nitrox, which is where we add a little bit of extra oxygen to try and reduce the nitrogen composition. The nitrogen is why we can't ascend too quickly, or at least one of the reasons. Nitrox lets us stay down a bit longer. If you want to go really, really deep, that's where something called trimix comes in. Oxygen is actually toxic when you go quite deep, so too much can actually ruin your day. By adding an inert gas like helium, you can actually reduce the nitrogen and the oxygen composition in the gas that you're breathing, and then dive even deeper. But that's pretty advanced stuff. Most divers, They just dive with air or like 30% nitrox. This is actually a very interesting question, and the short answer is sometimes. Whether something sinks or floats is all down to its buoyancy, which is basically how much water it displaces when it's placed into that water, how much water it pushes out of the way. If the item weighs less than that amount of water that it's displacing, it floats. If it weighs more than that water that it's pushing out of the way, it sinks. The interesting thing about scuba tanks is that their weight actually changes during the dive. All of the air that we cram into that tank actually weighs something. So as we breathe it and the bubbles just go up to the surface, it actually becomes a little bit lighter. You can sometimes tell if a tank is empty or not by literally picking it up. If it feels a little bit lighter than you expect, then it's probably empty. All scuba tanks will sink when they're full, pretty much. Steel tanks continue to sink when they're empty because steel is a very heavy metal. It sinks all the time, but it just doesn't sink as much, if that makes sense. And aluminium tanks can often float when they're empty because they change from negatively buoyant, meaning that they sink, to positively buoyant, and they float when they're empty. So there are a few questions answered, but believe me, there are plenty more questions out there that still need answering. If you have any particular questions, let me know down in the comments below and I will answer them in the Friday show Ask Mark. Don't forget to check out simplyscuba.com for the latest scuba diving equipment, as well as snorkeling and apnea gear. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.